Malaysia. So perfect place to start looking at some Honda analysis, Lewis. Both Pol Espargaro, in fact all four Honda riders last weekend were raving about the new Honda, particularly with the better rear grip it gave them. And yes, it's very difficult to draw too many serious conclusions into lap times today, but just the mere fact that Pol Espargaro is top of the timesheets on a Honda after the difficult times he had last year kind of does reflect the fact that they have found some clear direction with rear grip, and this is what Pol was demanding. This is what he wanted last year, so a good morale boost for Pol and the team.
Absolutely, and it is difficult to take too much from the lap times we're seeing today, but when we compare it to the World Superbike times, which I know is a dangerous comparison, but with the times we saw there back at their final round of the season late last year, these times compare pretty favourably, and given that we're on the first day of 3 here, a 1:32 is a pretty fast time, whatever way you look at it, and on any day in history, all the riders are dealing with the same conditions, and Pol Espargaro was fastest today, so that can only be seen as a positive for them and a confidence boost for Pol Espargaro is very much a confidence rider. As you say, rear grip is really what Honda are looking for. The early signs are they've found it. Grip was in pretty short supply, whatever way you look at it today, given the track conditions, so perhaps they'll get a better handle on how much progress they've made tomorrow, but the data we've got in front of our eyes so far suggests that Honda have made that step forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Repsol Honda were one of several teams this week that did their official team launch ahead of the opening Grand Prix in Qatar on March 20. Now, this man was talking quite big, very optimistic about his prospects of fighting for the podium on a regular basis in 2022. Pol Espargaro, they're on the number 44 machine. He says, Lewis, we can expect great things from the get-go in Qatar. He seemed like a transformed character from this much transformed Honda. Do we really expect, though, Pol to be right in the firing line fighting for the podium from that first Grand Prix?
Well, he's done it before, hasn't he? He has got a history of podiums and pole positions in MotoGP, so he's certainly capable. I think with Honda, I would be tempted to suggest that we're going to see the best from Honda as the season goes on. This is a motorcycle that's still in the very early stages of its development. Of course, it's a complete sea change in Honda in terms of their approach to their motorcycle. They've really almost ripped the scrapbook up and started again. So they are strong from this early stage of the season, but you would expect them really to get stronger and stronger. So if Pol Espargaro isn't in the podium fight in Qatar, that doesn't mean he's not going to be later in the season, because you just expect that motorcycle and that package to get better and better as we go. But Pol Espargaro had a particularly strong run in Qatar last season on a bike that certainly wasn't as favourable, you'd say, as this one is. And of course, he's got Marc Marquez alongside him, who I think will also expect to be right in the mix as well. I think the general vibes from Honda are positive.
You can see just some shots there earlier on from Mandalika of just how tricky the early track conditions were. A lot of dirt and dust being kicked up by that Michelin rear tyre for Pol Espargaro. Now, of course, it's an old cliche, but the first person you always want to beat in MotoGP, the first person you're always compared against, is your teammate. That's a particularly tough proposition for Pol Espargaro when your teammate is none other than one of the greatest we've ever seen in Grand Prix history, Marc Marquez. Now, of course, there was relief all round last weekend when Marc was able to return to his RC213V after a long winter injury layoff, that double vision problems which forced him out the last 2 Grand Prix of last year. Marc was back and back with a bang in Sepang, to the relief of his crew, which of course is led by long-serving crew chief Santi Hernandez. So how do they feel about having the main man back in the saddle?
Yeah, I mean, my impression, we have to be happy because we didn't expect to come to Japan after what happened last year with his problems. But yeah, we are quite happy because at the end we start the preseason. We can make a proper test with him. Of course, we need to improve. Of course, we need to have to learn how is the bike. He needs to learn how is the new concept of the bike. As we need to learn how to set up the bike, what Marc needs. But in general, I would like to say we are happy. I mean, at the end, yeah, the job they do in Japan with the new bike, I think it's quite good. Still is a younger project, but yeah, for the starting point, we can say, okay.
So these are some practice starts which are currently undergoing in Mandalika right now. Plus Spargo, pretty decent launch on that new RC213V. Here's the world champion Fabio Quartararo. Well, he'll be hoping for a cleaner launch in the Grand Prix on March the 20th in a few weeks' time. No great surprise, of course, to see with the track being affected by all the sand, the dirt and dust which was brought in by the overnight rain. The very best traction control and the very best launch control in the world. It's going to be very difficult to launch a 280, 300 horsepower MotoGP bike off the line. Now they're coming back to Honda on a very positive start to this 3-day Mandalika test. Let's turn our attention now to the 8 times world champion Marc Marquez, who was kind of reserved and pretty cautious about his title prospects last time out, or pre-Sepang. Taka Nakagami there. This is also live. Lewis, this is no great surprise, but this is what we expected from the practice starts. Very, very tricky with all that horsepower being put through that rear tyre. No great surprise to see a few guys lighting up the rear tyre on the line.
Absolutely. I'm certainly not surprised by Fabio Quartararo's start there, because he was right up against the pit wall, and I'd imagine it's pretty dirty over there. As they were saying earlier on in the show, there's a line, a racing line that's starting to form around this Mandalika circuit, but Fabio Quartararo certainly wasn't on it. He would have been on a pretty dirty part of racetrack there. So yeah, I'm not quite surprised that Fabio Quartararo found life as difficult as he did. But yeah, turning back to Honda, Marc Marquez, I think, has got to be seen as one of the favourites going into this season. I mean, his physical condition, I think, is the only question mark. We know the talent, we know what he's capable of, we know what he's done over the course of a glittering career, which has still got many, many more years left to run. But it was interesting to listen to Marc speaking after the Sepang test, saying that he still physically doesn't feel as if he can go flat out for a full day. So I think he was glad for a few days off to rest that body up, rest his shoulder and rest his arm, and just generally rest his body ahead of another busy 3 days, because as you say, Honda need him badly, and he needs this sport. He missed it in 2020, and he missed it in the back end of last season, and you know, you can just see the support that Marc Marquez has there, even if they are perhaps Simon Crafar fans in Marc Marquez shirts. But yeah, it's an important season for Marc Marquez, and the early stages would seem to suggest that he's got a bike he can work with. He had at times last season a bike that he was fighting really to try and make it fit. This bike doesn't seem to be more suitable to his riding style from the get-go, but I think it's a more compliant bike for Honda as a whole. And we know that Marc Marquez, you can put him on any motorcycle, give him a couple of days to ride it, he'll get the best out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Remember the last time Marc Marquez on your screens now on that new Honda was fully fit and the Honda was competitive? 2019, well, he finished every single race, either first or second. He doesn't expect that kind of domination moving forward into the future, not because, of course, of his recent injury problems, but, of course, as well, the emergence of young talents like Fabio Quartararo, the reigning world champion, and Pecco Bagnaia. It will be fascinating to see how it unfolds this year for 93 Marc Marquez. Of course, the key for him will be to remain fully fit. There's a few concerns about whether that double vision issue might strike back, but clearly Honda have done their homework. We knew they weren't going to be sleeping after another pretty tough year last season. There is Santi Hernandez there and Ramon Alrin on the left. Of course, crew chief to Pol Espargaro. They're just keeping a very close eye on the practice starts of their two men. The starts now are so important in MotoGP. Grid position crucial as well, particularly for the Yamahas, as Lewis touched upon last weekend in our coverage from Sepang. Now, of course, you can keep up to date with all the news and reviews and analysis throughout our social media channels over the course of the day. All videos and highlights will be on MotoGP.com as well. I know Jack Appleyard right now and Emilio Vasquez, they're going to be scurrying around the paddock getting some reaction. We'll be bringing you interviews very, very shortly. But there is the man who's enjoyed a very positive first contact with the Mandalika circuit over in Indonesia. Pol Espargaro leads the way then. That 132.466. And as Lewis mentioned as well, what a day. 6 of the manufacturers in MotoGP occupying the top 6 places. It looks like a circuit which will be good for close racing as well, which is what we like to hear. Belated happy birthday as well to this man. Taka Nakagami celebrates his 30th birthday this week. LCR Honda, one of several teams that launched this week. Some interesting observations conditions coming from Alex Marquez and this man Taka Nakagami. And Taka Nakagami, Lewis, no great surprise, not running that beautiful new Idemitsu LCR Honda livery, which we saw in the pictures here just a few days ago. Looking forward to seeing that on track in Qatar in just a few weeks' time. But Nakagami, he made it pretty crystal clear, Lewis, unless he starts fighting for the podium and getting on the podium on a regular basis, he looks unfortunately quite vulnerable. We know that there's some hot young Japanese talent coming through Moto3 and Moto2. Ai Ogura, no surprise, eyeing a MotoGP seat next year. So Nakagami, we say this about so many riders with it being contract year, big years for them, but that certainly is appropriate way to describe Taka Nakagami right now.
Yeah, I said this last week about Joan Zarco. In many ways, the problem that Taka Nakagami has is he's a known quantity. We know what he's capable of in MotoGP, and unfortunately for him, LCR Honda will be wanting to see a little bit more than what we've seen from him so far. He's not done a bad job at all, because 2020 he was sensational, finishing as high as he did. All he was missing was that podium finish, and of course he was well placed to try and challenge for victory in the Teruel Grand Prix after starting from pole position before crashing on the opening lap. That was really a sign last year as well. We saw it particularly at Mugello. We saw a very costly crash when he was in a good position. That's the kind of things Taka Nakagami has got to stamp out, because as we've already discussed with the factory riders, if that Honda is as good as we think and it just gets better and better over the course of the season, then Taka Nakagami will be in a good position to profit from that. But he's going to have to be strong from the get-go, because as I mentioned, it's not going to be very long into the season before we get into contract time. If Iagura is starting to tear it up in Moto2, then it's going to be very, very difficult for LCR Honda to resist that temptation. And it was a difficult day for Taka Nakagami today. He finished a little lower in the timesheets than he expected, but although he was showing pretty positive pace before having a crash, one of the many riders to crash through those double right-handers in the middle of the lap. But as we mentioned already, the conditions today were so very difficult to judge that Nakagami will be certainly looking forward to tomorrow and just putting this day behind him. The Honda's clearly fast, and Nakagami will be confident of getting the best out of it as the test goes on.
Well, one man who normally loves these tricky conditions, he's certainly not scared to light up a rear tyre around the MotoGP circuit. That's factory Ducati rider Jack Miller, and we can hear now live from Mandalika with the Australian. Over to you guys.
11, then you change directions to 12.
Thank you very much, Bertie. Yeah, Jack just catching up with Alex Rins at the moment, and I think he's just talking through a bit of a front-end moment. No, it's okay. Sorry. Continue. What was that all you're on about, Jack? Little front-end moment somewhere?
Yeah, no, just talking with Alex there about the group level, you know, it was getting better and better lap by lap. You could quite clearly see the track was just getting this line, nice clean line. But yeah, outside of it, I was just saying to him, between 11 and 12, where it sort of changes over, I was sort of trying to prepare one lap a little bit wider entry and just try to sweep through. And as I did, it just was on the dirty stuff, went away. But it was pretty much, that sums up most of the day, you know. I think it was good, you know. I'm glad everybody got out and got amongst it, because that's what the track needed. It wasn't going to get any better. It's one of those things, you know, that if it was a race weekend, it would. That's it. That's how it is, and that's how it is. For example, when we come to somewhere like Argentina that doesn't get used very much throughout the year, and it will be the same here, I think. But as we saw, you know, lap by lap, the track was getting better and better, and no, it was a lot of fun there at the end. I was really enjoying myself all day.
There's lots of space out there as well. It's a wide circuit.
Very wide, very wide. You almost get lost at some points, you know. But it's got a bit of everything, you know. There's some blind crests and stuff like that. That sort of triple right, let's say the 5, 6, 7, and then the really fast change of direction over 8, 9 is fantastic. You know, it uses every ounce of your strength there to try and muscle the thing over and then back over again while trying to get on the gas. It's a whole heap of fun, and an awesome layout. I mean, even just like going through that section and having the big mountain on the inside is kind of cool. It's definitely a unique track.
On MotoGP.com and our social channels, we've seen your lap in the car yesterday with Simon. Was there anything, once you're actually on the bike out there, that took you by surprise?
Definitely the dust. The dust. I mean, I've been running this track all week, and I didn't expect it to be like that. I know where it came from, if it was lying dormant in the asphalt, but yeah, it was kind of strange this morning. Like when Pecco and I went out, when it was quite wet, we were able to go pretty quick immediately, and Zarco, we were able to go like relatively quick, and nobody else. It got worse and worse as the laps went on. When the track was drying out, it stopped being so much water and it started becoming like mud on the track almost, and it was like slimy. Just like turn 2, you come in with understeer and you're like, what is, like the bike was just floating and you didn't know what it was. But we got to get back underway, and it took a bit to clean that all off with the help of all the bikes out there. But now there's a beautiful clean line. But it's quite treacherous if you drop a wheel off it. It feels almost like you're riding in the wet out there, like throughout the day, because you have this beautiful clean dry line, and then you have the dusty line on the outside, and it just starts floating. So, I saw a couple of boys go down just by touching just the outside. I watched Bisecki and Digi Antonio go down, and then my teammate the following corner. So, it wasn't ideal conditions today for testing, but I think we're on for a good couple of days now that the track's clean. We actually got to get through a couple of little items there this afternoon.
You got down, not you, but the grid as a whole got down to a 32.4 in the end.
Pole did, yeah.
What's left out there? What do you think is going to be the benchmark?
I think it's getting faster and faster. It's hard to say exactly what the benchmark is at the moment because the track still doesn't feel fantastic. The second last corner, like I said to the boys this morning,